So in this video I'm going to go over some basic commands that you're going to need to know for the A+ 220 1002 certification exam. My friend Nick is going to take it, so I'm just helping him out with some basic Linux commands that are in the objectives for the Core 2 exam. And these are all the basic Linux commands you're going to need to know that could possibly be on the test. So if you look over here on an Ubuntu virtual machine, if you're coming from Windows, you're used to a file system similar to this, right? You've maybe got a C drive, a desktop, and you've got images, documents, stuff like that. Well, in Linux, if you're not going to use the web UI, and generally we don't use the web UI a lot because it's a lot more effective to use the terminal. So if you right click and go to Open Terminal, initially you're going to end up in your home folder. So over here where it's home, I'm in home right now, and that's designated by this squiggly line here. And the first command we have is ls, and it stands for list. If I do an ls here in this home directory, I'm going to list all the folders and files that you would see here in this home directory. As you can see, I have images folder and images folder. And if I wanted to move into maybe my images folder, I could just cd, stands for change directory, into images. Do an ls, list all the files here in images. Let's back out. ls, right? So the next command on the list is grep. Grep lets you, find strings of text, maybe narrow down searches, right? So I've got a file here called file 12, I believe it is, right? Yes. And if I do a cat file 12, that's just going to output whatever is in file 12 to my terminal here. And I can see I've got a couple different lines of things. But if this was a huge file and I just wanted to know something about the word hello, right? I could cat and I could grep to just locate the words or letters that I wanted within that file. And then I have to actually cat file here. So we'll cat file 12. And there you have it, just hello. So maybe I wanted to do a ps-aux to see the running processes for all users. But I only wanted to know about the Firefox process, right? In that case, I could locate from this entire output here, right? If I just do a ps-aux, there's a lot of stuff here. But if I just do a grep to locate anything for Firefox within this output, it'll tell me just things for Firefox. So I'll do a Control-L to clear the screen here. And the next command is cd, and I've already showed you that. And again, it stands for change directory. So change directory images. I'm in the images directory. Maybe if I want to change directory back to the last directory I was in, I do a dot. And one dot stands for this directory. Two dots stands for the parent directory of the directory I'm in. So if I do a dot, it'll go back to my parent directory, which is home. We have the shutdown command. If you do a shutdown, right, assuming you're the root user, it's going to let you shut down the machine. If you are not the root user, if you are not a user with administrative permissions, super user permissions, it will not let you shut down. You would have to do a sudo, and we'll go over that in a minute. PWD versus password over here. So PWD shows you the path to the working directory. So think of it as path working directory. What directory? How do I get to where I am? All right. So I do PWD here. I'm in the home/user directory because if I go back, right, I'm in the home directory. If I do an ls to list what's in this directory, I have a user directory. If I cd into user, I'm in the user directory. So it just shows you from the root file system all the way to where you are. So if I cd images here, do a pwd, it shows me how to get there from the top of the file system. And the top of the file system is always cd/ for the root of the file system. Do an ls, I see everything here. So that's pwd, but what's password, right? Passwd. Passwd lets you set the password for a user. So if I add a user here, let's user add cola. I have to use sudo for that. And now ID COA has been added. The user COA has been added, but they don't have a password by default. So I use the passwd command to find the user I want to set or change that password for, and I have to do sudo, and then now I can enter COA's password, and we'll just make it COA. Not advisable, best practice. But now COA has a password of COA that I just set. So pwd shows you the path to the working directory you're in. So if I cd home, cd user, cd images, pwd, and passwd sets or changes the password for user. Now onto the move command. mv, right, stands for move. So let's go back here. If I get make a file here, I'll call it file 5, and call file 6. If I want to move a file from one directory to another, or this directory to another, I would do mv, the name of the file I want to move, right? And then where do I want to move it to? Maybe I want to move this to home, just straight to home, right? And then I want to call it file 5, right? In that case, why would I not just, I have to sudo here. Why would I not just copy file 5? Well, maybe I want to rename file 5, right? So you can use, not only move files with file, but you can, that's how you rename files in Linux. You use the move command. To rename a file in Linux, you use the move command. So if I want to, I move file 5 out of this directory. Let's say I wanted to move it back. So move home file 5. And I want it to go into the directory I'm in, so I'm just going to call it file 5. Oh, again, I have to sudo. I'm not used to that yet. And file 5 is back in this directory. Maybe I want to rename it to file 7. So move file 5, and then the name I want it to be renamed to file 7. And now if I go in ls, you can see file 5 is gone, and I have file 7. Onto the copy command. Move and copy are very similar, with the caveat being if you move, the file disappears from where it is to where you put it. If you copy, it stays in both places. And you can't rename with copy, you can only move with copy. So if I do a cp of file 7, again, the file you want, and then where you want file 7 to be, so maybe home file 7. Right. So I want it to go in the home directory as file 7. Now if I go back one to the home directory, you can see file 7 is here. But if I go to user, where I just was, file 7 is there also because I made a copy of it. RM stands for remove. So now maybe I want to get rid of file 7, right? So I do an RM file 7. But what if I want to do, let's say I have let's make a directory here. We'll call it example. And I basically just created a folder. I cd into example, change directory. Did I spell that wrong? Example. Where'd it go? There we go. All right. Let's make a file here. We'll call it test.file. And then I go back and I try and remove this directory, right? It does not like that at all. Oh, here we go. It says, cannot remove example as a directory. If I want to remove a directory with stuff in it, I have to do an rm-r. And now you can see the example directory that was here before is gone. chmod allows you to modify permissions on a file, right? So we're not going to go too in-depth here. We're not going in-depth with any of these commands, really. Just what they are and the basics of them. But file 6, right? If I do an ls-l to list more information on file 6 here, It's going to show me over here, I've got an RWRR. These are permissions for a file, right? This means read write for the user of who owns the file, read for the group of the file, and read for other. If I wanted to change permissions, maybe I wanted to allow the user to execute this file, if it was a program maybe, I would chmod to modify the permissions of the file. And we're not going to go into, the math or what any of this means, but basically I'm going to do a 7 to allow read, write, and execute for user. I'm going to do a 0. Well, I'll just do a 4 so they can still write and group, and a 4. And then file 6. And now if I do an ls-o, ls-o on file 6, you can see user now has the X attribute for execute. So that's chmod. This is modify permissions. chown allows you to change the user of a file, the owner of the file. So right now, user owns this file. But if I look at what users do I have here, right? Let's see. By etc password. Let's see what other users I have on this system. Okay, I have Sora. So if I do a chown Sora, then the person I want to change the owner of this file to, and then the file name. And not permitted. Again, I have to use sudo because I am not the root user right now. Sudo chown Sora file 6, right? Do an ls-o on file 6. You can see the user that owns this file is now not user, it is Sora. Whoever owns. I've changed the owner of a file. iwconfig and ifconfig, right? iwconfig shows you the status of your wireless network adapters on your device or devices, right? It tells you information about your wireless network settings on your devices. It's similar to ipconfig on Windows, but if you do an ifconfig, it shows you the non-wireless information, right? So if you're like, what's my IP address on my system? You would do an ifconfig, and you get the IP address of the system. Or if you wanted to see the wireless information, again, iwconfig. Command is ps, and what ps does is it lists running processes, right? Similar to on a Windows machine, if you were going to open Task Manager and you were going to look at all the running processes, you do a ps-a to see all the running processes on the machine, ps-au to show all of them for this user, ps-aux to show all of them for all users. If you do it, let's do a ps-a again, and you'll see this number here, and this is the process ID. The process ID is used to signify the differences between each process, right? It's like its own unique identifier. And then later, when we go over the kill command, you can use kill to get rid of process ID, to stop it if you didn't want it anymore. So I don't know what GSD sound is, but let's go ahead and do a kill on GSD sounds 1998 process ID. So now GSD sound, if I go ahead and do a ps-a and then grep for that, GSD sound, you see the 1998 one doesn't show up, even though GSD sound was up here, because we've killed that process. Next on the list, we've got su/sudo, right? So su stands for switch user. So if I wanted to switch user here to Cola, say I become Cola, right? I'd have to enter Cola's password, which we created earlier as Cola. And now I am Cola. Exit, and I'll go back to being the user. Sudo. Sudo is, you saw me run sudo every time I tried to run a command, right? It would say you don't have permissions to run this command. So I would run sudo. Sudo lets you run commands as another user. It's basically, if you want to think of it as switch user, do as user, right? So by default, when you sudo, you switch user and run command as the root user. So if I do a sudo -i here, I'm now root. Let's exit. If I wanted to run a certain command, maybe apt-get install git, right? It says you could not open a log file, unable to, permission denied, right? Are you root? If I did a sudo apt-get install git, assuming I have the permissions, of root, the same root, super user permissions to run this command as root. This is saying run this command as root, and now I have the permissions to do so, right? And I installed git earlier, so it doesn't need to be installed again. So basically, su is switch user, sudo is run this command as another user. By default, it's run as root. Apt-get, you just saw me do that. Apt-get is how you install things on Linux. On Windows, you're used to clicking a file, hitting launch, install, next, finish, right? On Linux machines, if I wanted to if I wanted to install an application, right, I would have to do apt-get install, and then the name of that application, or the URL to download that application from. Maybe the text editor Nano, right? And again, you see, I have to run a sudo, run as a root. Nano is already at the newest version, so it's already installed. But you get the idea. If you wanted to install some kind of software, if someone was like, hey, go install the screen tool, right? I would just do a sudo apt-get install screen. If it's not installed already and it found it, it's going to say this software requires this other software to be installed for it to work. Do you want to continue? Yes or no? And it would hit Y for yes. And then we'll run through that install of screening. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. The next command is vi. So vi by default is the text editor included in most Linux distributions. So let's see, I have a file here called index.html, right? If I vi index.html and I hit tab there to autocomplete, it's going to bring me into this file. And here I can, let's just quickly go over vi. I can navigate using the arrow keys. If I wanted to make a change, I would hit I, and you see how it says insert at the bottom. And that would let me type different things in here, right? If I wanted to save whatever I've typed, or maybe move to a different mode, right? Insert is a mode. There's different modes. There's visual mode, where I can select multiple things at once. But let's go back to insert mode. Say I'm done typing and I want to save. I hit escape, colon, and then I want to write what I just saved, and then I want to quit, right? So this is going to basically save the changes I made and exit the file. If I vi the file again, do I for insert mode, enter, hello. Maybe I want to just write and not quit, so I do an escape, colon W, and my change has been made. Now if I want to quit, colon Q. DD stands for destroy disk. I don't have another device hooked up, so I can't really give a good example of this, but basically it stands for destroy disk because DD is used for making it's used for making an image of your disk, right? So if I do an ls block here, don't pay attention to any of this stuff up here, but I have a block device here, which is essentially would be my hard drive, right? If I wanted to make an image of that, I would use the dd command to make an image of that hard drive. And the way I would do that is I would do a dd if equals device sda here, right? And then I would do an of equals device st maybe b, right? If I had another hard drive in plugin called SDB or a USB plugin called SDB, and I wanted to make a copy of this onto that device, this would be the command to do it. And then the kill command over here, which we already went over when we did the PS-A, and we found one of these process IDs, which was the GSD sound process ID, and we went ahead and killed that, right? And that's it. Hopefully it wasn't too long, too boring, and hopefully you got the basics of all these commands. Nicholas.